The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky Afghan mountains as Staff Sergeant Maya Chun adjusted her sniper scope one final time. Her SEAL team had been tracking a high-value target for 3 weeks, following intelligence that led them deep into Taliban territory. The mission was supposed to be a quick in-out extraction, but nothing ever went according to plan in these mountains. Maya had fought for every inch of respect she'd earned in the Navy SEALs. Being one of the first women to complete BUD/S training meant every mistake was magnified, every success questioned. Her teammates had gradually come to trust her skills, but she still felt the weight of proving herself with each mission. Today would be no different. The team of 8 SEALs moved silently through the mountain pass, their target a compound nestled in a valley below. According to intelligence, their target was meeting with other terrorist leaders to plan attacks on American forces. The compound appeared quiet, with only a few guards visible from their position 800 meters away on the ridgeline. Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez, the team leader, signaled for everyone to take positions. Maya found her spot behind a large boulder, setting up her M24 sniper rifle with practiced efficiency. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly. A main building surrounded by smaller structures, all enclosed by a high wall with watchtowers at each corner. Overwatch in position, Maya whispered into her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had done this hundreds of times in training, dozens of times in real combat situations, but something felt different about this mission. The intelligence seemed too clean, the target too easy to find. Her instincts proved correct when the first shots rang out from the valley below. The team had barely begun their descent when muzzle flashes erupted from every direction. They weren't walking into a meeting, they were walking into a trap. Enemy fighters poured out of hidden positions, surrounding the compound and cutting off all escape routes. Contact! Contact! We're taking heavy fire. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio as the team scrambled for cover. Maya watched through her scope as her teammates dove behind rocks and returned fire, but they were vastly outnumbered. She counted at least 30 enemy fighters, maybe more, all armed with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades. The SEAL team found themselves pinned down in a narrow section of the valley, with no cover except for scattered boulders. Enemy fire came from 3 sides, with fighters positioned in the watchtowers behind the compound walls and in the rocky outcroppings on the opposite ridge. It was a killing field, perfectly designed to trap advancing forces. Maya's training kicked in as she assessed the situation through her scope. Her teammates were taking cover wherever they could find it, but their position was rapidly becoming untenable. Grenades exploded nearby, sending shards of rock flying through the air. The enemy had superior numbers, superior positioning, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Overwatch, we need immediate support, Rodriguez called out, his voice strained as bullets whizzed overhead. Can you see our position? Maya adjusted her scope and quickly located her teammates. They were spread across a 100-meter area, using whatever cover they could find. Some were wounded. She could see Petty Officer Martinez favoring his left arm, and Seaman Johnson was bleeding from his forehead. The enemy fire was so intense that her teammates couldn't even lift their heads to return accurate shots. I have eyes on friendlies, Maya responded, already identifying priority targets. Give me 30 seconds to start clearing the field. She had trained for scenarios like this, but the reality was overwhelming. 30 enemy fighters against 8 SEALs, with her team trapped in the open and taking casualties. The enemy had planned this ambush perfectly, using their compound as bait to draw American forces into a prepared killing zone. Maya forced herself to focus on her breathing, just like she had learned during sniper school. Inhale, exhale, find the target, control the trigger. The chaos of battle faded into background noise as she entered the zone that all snipers knew. That moment of perfect clarity where time seemed to slow down and every shot mattered. Her first target was a fighter in the eastern watchtower who had a clear line of sight on Rodriguez's position. The man was leaning out from behind cover, confidently spraying automatic fire down at the trapped seals. Maya calculated the distance, adjusted for wind, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley, and the fighter dropped immediately. The enemy fire continued without pause, but Maya had already moved on to her next target. A group of 3 fighters had positioned themselves behind a low wall, taking turns popping up to fire at her teammates. Maya waited patiently until one of them exposed himself for too long. Another shot, another target eliminated. The enemy began to realize they were taking sniper fire from the ridge, but they couldn't locate Maya's position. She had chosen her spot carefully, with the morning sun behind her and plenty of natural camouflage. The rocky terrain and shadows made it nearly impossible for the enemy to spot her muzzle flash from their position in the valley. Maya worked methodically, prioritizing targets based on the immediate threat they posed to her teammates. A fighter with an RPG launcher became her next target. She couldn't allow him to get off a shot that might wipe out multiple SEALs at once. The man was crouched behind a concrete barrier, preparing to fire when Maya's bullet found its mark. Each shot had to count. Maya carried limited ammunition, and there was no possibility of resupply in their current situation. She had perhaps 50 rounds and at least 25 enemy fighters still active. Mathematics wasn't on her side, but precision was. Every bullet had to eliminate a threat. Every target had to be chosen carefully. The enemy fighters began changing their tactics, moving more cautiously and using better cover. They had realized that staying exposed for more than a few seconds meant death. But Maya had been trained to hunt targets who knew they were being hunted. Patience was her greatest weapon. She watched through her scope as 2 fighters attempted to flank her teammates from the south. They moved in short bursts, using rock formations as cover between movements. Maya tracked their progress, waiting for the perfect moment when both targets would be exposed simultaneously. When they made their final dash across open ground, she was ready. The first shot dropped the lead fighter immediately. The second man hesitated for a split second, confused by his companion's sudden collapse. That hesitation cost him his life as Maya's follow-up shot found its target. 2 threats eliminated with 2 bullets. Exactly the kind of efficiency she needed to make her limited ammunition last. Down in the valley, her teammates were fighting for their lives. Despite Maya's support from above, they were still outnumbered and outgunned. Seaman Phillips had taken a bullet in the leg and was unable to move effectively. Chief Petty Officer Davis was providing medical aid while simultaneously returning fire, leaving him exposed to enemy shots. Maya could see the desperation in her teammates' movements. They were running low on ammunition, taking casualties, and had no clear avenue of escape. The enemy had them completely surrounded, and more fighters seemed to be arriving from other parts of the compound. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a carefully planned operation to eliminate an entire SEAL team. The weight of responsibility settled on Maya's shoulders like a lead blanket. 8 lives depended on her ability to thin out the enemy numbers enough to give her team a fighting chance. She had always known that being a sniper meant making life and death decisions, but the theoretical had suddenly become brutally real. Through her scope, she watched as Rodriguez gestured frantically to his men, trying to coordinate their movements despite the overwhelming enemy fire. Maya realized that her team leader was planning something desperate, probably a coordinated assault on the compound walls to break out of the killing field. It was a high-risk move that would likely result in heavy casualties, but staying in their current position meant certain death. Maya keyed her radio one more time before the real fight began. Overwatch to team leader. I'm going to start clearing a path. When I give the signal, move fast and don't look back. Trust me to cover your advance. She had eliminated 5 enemy fighters, but 25 remained. The odds were still impossible, but Maya had something the enemy didn't expect: the cold precision of a highly trained American sniper who would never abandon her teammates. The real battle was just beginning. Maya's finger found the trigger as she identified her next series of targets. The enemy had grown more cautious after losing 5 fighters, but Their confidence was returning as they realized the sniper fire had slowed. They didn't understand that Maya was conserving ammunition, waiting for the perfect moment to create maximum impact with minimum shots. A cluster of 4 fighters had taken position behind an old truck near the compound's main gate. They were using the vehicle as mobile cover, taking turns to fire around its edges. Maya could see they were coordinating their movements, which made them dangerous but also predictable. She waited patiently as they fell into a rhythm. When the 4th fighter leaned out to fire, Maya was ready. Her shot punched through the truck's thin metal door and found its target. The man dropped, causing confusion among his companions. In their panic, 2 of them exposed themselves simultaneously as they tried to understand where the shot had come from. Maya's 2nd and 3rd shots came in rapid succession, dropping both fighters before they could return to cover. The remaining fighter behind the truck made a critical mistake. He panicked and ran for better cover. Maya tracked his movement easily, leading him just enough to compensate for his running speed. Her 4th shot ended his retreat permanently. 4 enemies eliminated in less than 30 seconds, bringing her total to 9. Down in the valley, Rodriguez saw his opportunity. Maya's elimination of the fighters near the main gate had created a small gap in the enemy's defensive line. He signaled to his team, pointing toward a cluster of rocks about 50 meters closer to the compound. It wasn't much, but it would give them better firing positions and a chance to treat their wounded. Moving in 3, 2, 1, go. Rodriguez's command crackled through the radio as the SEAL team broke from cover simultaneously. Maya immediately shifted her focus to providing overwatch for their movement, scanning for any enemy fighters who might have clear shots at her advancing teammates. A fighter in the western watchtower swung his rifle toward the moving SEALs. Maya's bullet reached him before he could fire, sending his body tumbling from the elevated position. Another fighter emerged from behind the compound's main building, apparently trying to get a better angle on the advancing Americans. Maya's shot caught him center mass, dropping him instantly. The SEAL team reached their new position with only 1 additional casualty. Petty Officer Williams had taken a bullet in the shoulder, but he was still combat effective. Their new cover gave them better protection and allowed Chief Davis to properly treat the wounded while the others maintained defensive fire. Maya could see that her teammates were in better spirits despite their injuries. The successful movement had proven they weren't completely trapped, and her consistent sniper support was keeping enemy heads down. But she also knew the hardest part was yet to come. She had eliminated 11 fighters, leaving approximately 19 still active, and her ammunition was running dangerously low. Through her scope, she observed the enemy adapting to their losses. The remaining fighters were staying behind hard cover, only exposing themselves when absolutely necessary. They were also spreading out more, making it impossible for Maya to engage multiple targets quickly. The enemy commander was learning from his mistakes. A new threat emerged as 3 fighters began moving toward a position that would allow them to fire down on her teammates from an elevated angle. Maya couldn't allow them to reach that position, but they were moving carefully, using excellent cover and fire discipline. She would need to be creative. Maya noticed a propane tank near the fighter's intended destination. It was an old cooking gas cylinder, probably left behind by previous occupants of the compound. She adjusted her aim carefully, accounting for the increased distance and the small target size. Her shot struck the tank perfectly, creating a massive explosion that eliminated all 3 fighters and destroyed their intended firing position. The explosion sent a shockwave through the remaining enemy forces. They had never faced a sniper capable of such precision and tactical thinking. Maya could see fighters looking nervously at other potential hazards around their positions, suddenly aware that their cover might not be as safe as they had assumed. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio with new urgency. Overwatch, we're receiving reports of enemy reinforcements approaching from the east. Estimated 15 additional fighters, ETA 10 minutes. We need to break out of this position before they arrive. Maya's blood ran cold. 15 more fighters would make the situation completely hopeless. Her team was already outnumbered, and low on ammunition. Adding more enemies to the equation would turn a difficult fight into a massacre. She had to thin out the current enemy forces significantly before those reinforcements arrived. She began working faster, abandoning some of her careful patience in favor of aggressive target engagement. A fighter who exposed himself for just 2 seconds found himself in Maya's crosshairs. Another shot, another enemy down. She immediately shifted to a second target who was moving between positions, dropping him before he could reach safety. The enemy return fire intensified as they realized the sniper was becoming more active. Bullets began impacting near Maya's position, forcing her to adjust her firing point slightly. She moved 15 feet to the left, finding new cover behind a different boulder formation. The change in angle gave her better visibility of the compound's northern section. From her new position, Maya could see something that made her heart race. Enemy fighters were setting up a mortar position behind the main building. If they got that weapon operational, they could rain explosive death down on her teammates regardless of their cover. The mortar had to be her priority target. 3 fighters were assembling the weapon, while 2 others provided security. Maya knew she couldn't eliminate all 5 before the mortar became operational, so she had to choose her target strategically. She aimed for the fighter who appeared to be directing the setup, probably the weapons expert who knew how to operate the mortar effectively. Her shot was perfect, dropping the leader instantly and causing confusion among the remaining fighters. But they didn't abandon the weapon. Instead, another fighter stepped forward to take over the assembly process. Maya eliminated him as well, but a third man immediately took his place. Realizing that killing individual operators wouldn't stop the mortar setup, Maya changed tactics. She aimed for the weapon itself, specifically the base plate that anchored the mortar tube. Her high-powered rifle round struck the metal plate at exactly the right angle, warping it beyond use and rendering the entire weapon system inoperable. The fighters around the destroyed mortar looked around in confusion and fear. Their most dangerous weapon had been neutralized by a single, perfectly placed shot from an invisible sniper. Maya could see the psychological impact of her precision spreading through the enemy ranks. They were beginning to understand that they weren't fighting an ordinary opponent. Maya's ammunition count was becoming critical. She estimated perhaps 15 rounds remaining, while approximately 12 enemy fighters were still active. The mathematics were getting closer to manageable, but those incoming reinforcements would tip the balance back toward disaster. She needed to create an opportunity for her team to escape before those reinforcements arrived. Looking through her scope, Maya studied the terrain between her teammates' position and the valley's eastern exit. The path was relatively open, but several enemy positions had clear firing lanes that would make the route extremely dangerous. Maya identified the key positions that had to be eliminated to open an escape route. 2 fighters in a stone building had perfect overwatch of the eastern path. Another pair had positioned themselves behind a concrete wall that commanded the entire escape route. Eliminating these 4 targets would give her team a fighting chance to break out. The fighters in the stone building were her first priority. They had grown complacent, believing their thick walls provided complete protection. Maya studied the building carefully, noting the wooden shutters and the way the fighters occasionally moved past the windows. She waited patiently until both targets were visible simultaneously. Maya's shot punched through the wooden shutter and struck the first fighter's center mass. The second fighter instinctively moved toward his fallen comrade, exposing himself to Maya's follow-up shot. 2 targets eliminated with 2 bullets, exactly the kind of efficiency she needed with her limited ammunition. The fighters behind the concrete wall had witnessed their companions' deaths and were now staying completely behind cover. Maya could see their rifle barrels occasionally poking around the wall's edge, but no clear shots at the operators themselves. She would need to force them into the open somehow. Maya spotted several loose rocks on the hillside above the fighter's position. A carefully placed shot could potentially cause a small rock slide that would force the hidden fighters to relocate. She aimed at a particularly unstable-looking section and fired watching as her bullets started a cascade of falling stones. The rock slide worked better than expected, sending a shower of debris down on the fighter's position. Both men were forced to abandon their cover and run for new positions. Maya was ready for their movement, dropping the first fighter as he ran and wounding the second badly enough to take him out of the fight. Maya's shot count was now critical, perhaps 8 rounds remaining with approximately 6 enemy fighters still active. But, more importantly, she had cleared the eastern escape route. The path was now open for her teammates to make their break for freedom. Rodriguez had been watching Maya's systematic elimination of enemy positions, and he understood what she was creating for them. He gathered his team, checking their ammunition and preparing for what might be their only chance to escape the killing field. "All units, prepare for extraction movement," Rodriguez commanded over the radio. "Overwatch has cleared our path. We move on my mark in 60 seconds. Wounded stay in the middle of formation. Everyone else provides covering fire." Maya switched her focus to the remaining enemy fighters, looking for any last-minute threats to her teammates' escape route. She could hear the approaching reinforcements in the distance, vehicles moving up the mountain roads, probably carrying the additional 15 fighters that intelligence had warned about. Time was running out. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder as Maya scanned the remaining enemy positions through her scope. She had perhaps 3 minutes before the reinforcements arrived, and her teammates were preparing for their desperate dash to freedom. Every shot from now on had to count more than ever. 2 enemy fighters remained in positions that could threaten her team's escape route. One had taken cover behind a water tank near the compound's southern wall, while another was positioned in a drainage culvert that offered excellent concealment. Both positions gave the fighters clear fields of fire across the escape path her teammates would have to take. Maya studied the fighter behind the water tank first. He was disciplined, only exposing minimal portions of his body when acquiring targets. But Maya noticed a pattern in his movements. Every 20 seconds, he would shift slightly to get a better view of different sectors. During these shifts, his shoulder would briefly appear beyond the tank's protection. She timed his movements carefully, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. When his shoulder appeared for the 3rd time, Maya was ready. Her shot struck him precisely, spinning him away from his protected position. The fighter stumbled into the open, wounded but not dead, giving Maya a clear follow-up shot that ended the threat permanently. The fighter in the drainage culvert had witnessed his companion's elimination and was now staying completely hidden. Maya could see the barrel of his rifle occasionally protruding from the concrete opening, but no part of his body was visible. She needed to force him out somehow. Maya remembered her training about ricochets and angular shooting. The culvert's concrete interior would create predictable bullet deflection patterns if she could calculate the angles correctly. She aimed at a specific point inside the culvert where a deflected bullet would likely find its target. Her shot struck the concrete wall and bounced exactly as planned, the wounded fighter's scream confirming a successful hit. The remaining enemy fighters were now completely demoralized. They had watched Maya systematically eliminate their comrades with impossible precision, turning their carefully planned ambush into a nightmare of accurate sniper fire. Several fighters abandoned their positions entirely, fleeing toward the approaching reinforcement vehicles. "Execute, execute, execute." Rodriguez's command echoed across the valley as the SEAL team broke from cover and began their sprint toward the eastern exit. Maya immediately shifted her focus to provide overwatch for their movement, her remaining ammunition precious beyond measure. Chief Davis carried Seaman Phillips, who couldn't run on his wounded leg. Petty Officer Williams, despite his shoulder wound, provided rear security with his rifle ready. The team moved in a tight formation, covering each other's movement while maintaining maximum speed across the dangerous terrain. Maya tracked their progress through her scope, scanning constantly for any enemy fighters who might emerge to threaten her teammates. A single fighter appeared from behind a building, raising his rifle toward the fleeing SEALs. Maya's shot dropped him before he could fire, but the action revealed her position to the remaining enemies. Suddenly, concentrated automatic weapons fire began impacting around Maya's position. The remaining fighters had triangulated her location, and were attempting to suppress her with overwhelming firepower. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around her, sending stone fragments flying through the air. Maya was forced to duck behind cover as enemy fire intensified. She couldn't provide overwatch for her teammates while bullets were impacting all around her position. The timing couldn't have been worse. Her team was in the most dangerous part of their escape route, completely exposed in open ground. The approaching reinforcement vehicles were now clearly visible, racing up the mountain road toward the compound. Maya estimated 2 minutes before they arrived with fresh fighters and additional firepower. Her teammates were still 60 meters from safety, moving as fast as possible while carrying their wounded. Maya made a critical decision. Rather than staying hidden and safe, she exposed herself just enough to acquire targets among the fighters who were suppressing her position. Enemy bullets whistled past her head as she identified a fighter who was directing the suppressing fire from behind a concrete barrier. Her shot was rushed, but accurate enough, striking the target in the chest and causing the coordinated enemy fire to falter momentarily. Maya immediately ducked back behind cover as return fire intensified, but she had bought her teammates precious seconds to continue their escape. Through breaks in the enemy fire, Maya could see her team making good progress toward the eastern exit. They were now 40 meters from relative safety, but the most dangerous part of their route still lay ahead. A narrow passage between two rock formations created a natural choke point where they would be vulnerable to enemy fire from multiple angles. Maya knew she had to eliminate the last few enemy fighters before her teammates reached that choke point. She had perhaps 4 rounds remaining, and at least 3 active enemies were still in positions to threaten the escape route. The mathematics were tight, but not impossible if she made every shot count. The first reinforcement vehicle crested the hill and began speeding toward the compound. Maya could see armed fighters hanging off its sides, weapons ready for immediate deployment. She had perhaps 90 seconds before fresh enemies would be in position to cut off her teammates' escape entirely. Maya popped up from cover just long enough to engage the nearest threat, a fighter who had moved to a position overlooking the choke point her teammates would have to traverse. Her shot was perfect, dropping the target immediately. Enemy return fire forced her back behind cover, but she had eliminated the most dangerous threat to her team's escape. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled urgency. 30 seconds to the exit point. All units maintain speed and dispersion. Maya could see her teammates approaching the critical choke point between the rock formations. 2 enemy fighters remained in positions that commanded that passage, and both were preparing to engage the fleeing SEALs. Maya had 2 rounds left and 2 targets, no margin for error. She rose from cover one final time, knowing this exposure would draw every remaining enemy weapon in her direction. The first fighter was already aiming at her teammates when Maya's bullet found its mark, sending him tumbling from his elevated position. The second fighter swung his rifle toward Maya's exposed position, but her last round struck him before he could fire. Enemy bullets filled the air around Maya's position as she ducked behind cover, but both threats to her teammates' escape had been eliminated. The choke point was clear, and she could hear Rodriguez shouting orders as the team moved through the dangerous passage toward safety. The first reinforcement vehicle skidded to a stop outside the compound's main gate, disgorging 8 fresh fighters who immediately began moving toward the last known positions of the SEAL team. But they were too late. Maya's teammates had successfully navigated the choke point and were now in cover among the rocks on the eastern side of the valley. Maya's rifle was empty, her mission as Overwatch sniper complete. She had fired 47 rounds and eliminated 23 enemy fighters, creating the opportunity her teammates needed to escape an impossible situation. But her own escape was now the critical problem. She was alone on the ridge with no ammunition and at least 20 fresh enemy fighters closing in on her position. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio one last time before static took over. Overwatch, we're in safe position and calling for extraction. Your position is compromised. Execute your escape and evasion plan immediately. Maya looked down at her empty rifle, then at the approaching enemy vehicles. She had always known this moment might come. The moment when a sniper's greatest enemy became her own isolation. She was 1,500 meters from her team's position with no ammunition and no clear escape route. The enemy knew approximately where she was and had fresh reinforcements to search every possible hiding spot. But Maya had trained for this scenario during SEER school: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Every special operations soldier learned to operate behind enemy lines with minimal equipment and no support. She might be out of ammunition, but she was far from helpless. Maya quickly broke down her rifle into manageable pieces, keeping only the essential components and abandoning everything else. Weight would be critical for the next phase of her mission, staying ahead of enemy search teams while navigating difficult mountain terrain. She checked her remaining equipment: sidearm with 2 magazines, knife, emergency radio, basic survival gear, and her determination to reach friendly lines. The enemy fighters were spreading out across the ridge, searching systematically for her position. Maya could hear their voices echoing off the rocks as they communicated in their local language, coordinating their search pattern. They knew she was somewhere in the area, but the rocky terrain offered countless hiding spots and multiple escape routes. Maya began moving carefully through the rocks, staying low and using every available piece of cover. Her teammates were safe. The mission had been accomplished despite impossible odds, and now her only remaining objective was survival. The real test of her training was just beginning. Behind her, she could hear the enemy fighters growing more frustrated as their search failed to locate her position. They had found her abandoned equipment and empty shell casings, confirming that the sniper who had decimated their forces had been operating from this general area. But Maya was already 200 meters away and moving steadily toward the mountains where rescue helicopters might be able to reach her. The hardest part of any sniper mission wasn't the shooting, it was getting home afterward. Maya had completed the impossible first half of her mission. Now she had to complete the second half, alone in enemy territory with the clock ticking toward either rescue or capture. Maya moved through the rocky terrain like a ghost, using every piece of cover to mask her movement from the enemy search teams below. The morning sun was climbing higher, which meant better visibility for her pursuers, but also more heat reflecting off the rocks to distort their vision. Every advantage mattered when survival depended on staying invisible. Behind her, she could hear the enemy fighters spreading out across the ridge in a systematic search pattern. Their voices carried on the thin mountain air as they called out positions and coordinated their hunt. Maya estimated at least 15 fighters were actively searching for her, with more arriving in vehicles every few minutes. The terrain worked in her favor initially. The Afghan mountains were a maze of rocky outcroppings, narrow passages, and steep cliffs that offered countless hiding spots. Maya had studied topographical maps of this region during mission planning, and her photographic memory now served her well as she navigated toward higher ground. Her immediate objective was reaching the emergency extraction point established during their original mission briefing. The location was 3 kilometers northeast of her current position, on a ridgeline that could accommodate helicopter landings. But getting there meant crossing 2 valleys and climbing nearly 1,000 feet of elevation while avoiding enemy patrols. Maya checked her radio, hoping to establish communication with friendly forces. Static filled her earpiece. The enemy was jamming all frequencies, which meant no immediate possibility of calling for help. She would have to reach the extraction point on her own initiative and hope that search and rescue teams would eventually check the predetermined location. The first major obstacle appeared as Maya crested a small ridge. Below her lay a valley that she would have to cross, but enemy vehicles were already moving through the area. 2 trucks full of fighters were systematically searching every possible hiding spot, while additional teams were setting up checkpoints at the valley's exits. Maya observed the enemy search pattern for several minutes, timing their movements and identifying gaps in their coverage. The trucks moved in a predictable routine, searching one area thoroughly before moving to the next position. If she timed her crossing correctly, she could slip between their search zones while they were focused elsewhere. She waited until both vehicles were concentrated on the valley's western side, then began her descent. Maya moved in short bursts, covering perhaps 20 meters before freezing behind available cover. Each movement had to be carefully calculated to avoid exposing her silhouette against the sky or creating noise that might attract attention. Halfway across the valley, Maya heard voices approaching from her left. A foot patrol of 4 fighters was moving directly toward her position, apparently following tracks or some other sign they had discovered. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they would be close enough to spot her hiding place behind a cluster of rocks. Maya drew her sidearm and checked the magazine, 15 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. She couldn't afford a firefight with multiple enemies, but she also couldn't allow herself to be captured. The enemy knew she was the sniper who had eliminated their comrades, and her treatment as a prisoner would likely be brutal and brief. The patrol leader was gesturing toward Maya's general area, apparently convinced that the sniper had passed through this location. Maya could see their faces now, young men with the hardened expressions of experienced fighters, carrying their weapons with the casual confidence of people accustomed to violence. Maya made her decision quickly. Rather than waiting to be discovered, she would create a diversion that might draw the patrol away from her actual escape route. She carefully aimed at a rock formation 50 meters to the west and fired a single shot, the sound echoing off the valley walls. The patrol immediately moved toward the sound, believing they had found their target. Maya waited until they were committed to investigating the false location, then quickly moved in the opposite direction. She covered 100 meters before the fighters realized they had been deceived, but by then, she was already concealed in a new position. The single gunshot had alerted every enemy unit in the area. Radio chatter increased dramatically as teams reported the contact and began converging on the valley. Maya could see dust clouds rising from multiple directions as vehicles raced toward her last known position. Maya realized she had traded immediate safety for long-term problems. The enemy now knew her approximate location and would concentrate their search efforts in this area. But her deception had also bought her time to continue moving toward the extraction point while they searched the wrong places. The second major obstacle was a steep climb up the valley's eastern wall. The slope was too exposed for daylight crossing. Any movement would be visible to enemy observers for miles around. Maya would have to wait for darkness, but that meant spending an entire day hiding while enemy search teams scoured the area around her. Maya found a concealed position in a cluster of large boulders that offered protection from observation and some shade from the increasing heat. She could see the entire valley from this location, which would allow her to track enemy movements while remaining hidden. More importantly, the position offered multiple escape routes if her hiding place was discovered. The day passed slowly as Maya watched enemy search teams methodically work through the valley below. They found several false leads, pieces of equipment she had deliberately left behind to confuse their tracking efforts. Each discovery triggered intensive searches of the surrounding area, buying Maya additional time as the enemy wasted effort investigating dead ends. Maya rationed her water carefully, knowing that dehydration could kill her faster than enemy bullets in this environment. The Afghan sun was merciless, reflecting off the rocks and turning her hiding place into an oven. She used her emergency poncho to create shade and minimize water loss through perspiration. As afternoon turned to evening, Maya observed enemy search patterns and identified the best route for her night movement. The enemy had established observation posts on several high points, but gaps existed in their coverage that could be exploited during hours of darkness. Enemy radio chatter suggested growing frustration among the search teams. They had found evidence that the sniper was in the area, but had failed to locate her actual position. Maya could hear heated arguments between team leaders as they debated search strategies and blamed each other for the lack of results. When full darkness finally arrived, Maya began her ascent of the valley's eastern wall. The climb was treacherous even in daylight. Loose rocks, steep slopes, and exposure to enemy observation from multiple directions. In darkness, every step became a calculated risk that might trigger a rock slide or lead to a fatal fall. Maya moved with infinite patience, testing each handhold and foothold before committing her weight. The climb took 3 hours to cover what should have been 30 minutes of movement, but silence and stealth were more important than speed. Any noise could attract enemy attention and end her escape attempt. Reaching the top of the valley wall, Maya found herself on a windswept plateau that stretched toward the extraction point. The terrain was more open here, offering less concealment but faster movement. In the distance, she could see lights from enemy positions scattered across the landscape like deadly stars. Maya checked her GPS coordinates and confirmed her position. She was now within 1 kilometer of the extraction point, but the most dangerous part of her journey still lay ahead. The enemy had positioned observation posts on the high ground around the landing zone, anticipating that any rescue attempt would target that location. The extraction point itself was a relatively flat area on a ridgeline that could accommodate helicopter landings. Maya had helped select the location during mission planning because it offered good approaches for rescue aircraft while providing cover for landing operations. But now that same defensible position was working against her. Maya could see at least 2 enemy positions that commanded views of the extraction point. Both were manned by fighters with night vision equipment, making any approach extremely dangerous. She would have to neutralize these positions or find an alternative way to signal for rescue. Her radio crackled with faint transmissions as atmospheric conditions briefly allowed long-range communication. Maya could make out fragments of American voices coordinating search and rescue operations. Friendly forces were actively looking for her, but their transmissions were too broken to establish two-way communication. Maya realized that even if she reached the extraction point safely, there was no guarantee that rescue helicopters would arrive. The enemy's surface-to-air capabilities might prevent helicopter operations in the area, leaving her stranded at the landing zone with no way to signal her presence to friendly aircraft. But staying in place wasn't an option either. Enemy search teams were closing in on her general area, and daylight would make concealment nearly impossible. Maya had to reach the extraction point and hope that her training, determination, and the skill of American rescue crews would be enough to get her home. The final approach to the extraction point would be the ultimate test of everything she had learned about stealth, patience, and survival. Maya checked her remaining ammunition one more time, 13 rounds in her sidearm. Not much for a final stand, but hopefully enough to make a difference if everything else failed. Maya studied the enemy positions around the extraction point through her small binoculars, counting at least 6 fighters visible in 2 separate observation posts. They had chosen their locations well, overlapping fields of fire that covered all approaches to the landing zone. Any helicopter attempting to land would face concentrated small arms fire from elevated positions. The eastern observation post was built into a natural rock formation about 400 meters from the landing zone. Maya could see the muzzle flash suppressors on their weapons and the distinctive green glow of night vision equipment. 3 fighters were visible, taking turns scanning different sectors while maintaining radio communication with other positions. The western post was smaller, but equally dangerous, positioned on a slight rise that commanded the primary helicopter approach route. 2 fighters were manning this position, and Maya noticed they had what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher among their equipment. That single weapon could destroy any rescue helicopter before it even touched down. Maya checked the time on her watch, 0230 hours local time. Dawn would arrive in approximately 3 hours, ending any realistic chance of helicopter extraction under cover of darkness. Enemy reinforcements would also be easier to coordinate and deploy once they had daylight to work with. Her radio suddenly crackled with a strong, clear transmission that made her heart race with hope. Any station, this is Rescue 27 on guard frequency. We are conducting search operations for missing personnel. If you can hear this transmission, respond on emergency frequency. Maya quickly switched to the emergency frequency and keyed her transmitter. Rescue 27, this is Overwatch. I'm alive and mobile, approaching extraction point Alpha. Multiple enemy positions around landing zone. Request immediate assistance. The response came back immediately, the pilot's voice calm and professional despite the dangerous circumstances. Overwatch, Rescue 27 has good copy on your transmission. We have been searching for your team for 8 hours. Confirm your current position and enemy strength around extraction point. Maya provided precise coordinates and detailed information about enemy positions, weapon systems, and likely response times for additional forces. The rescue helicopter was still 20 minutes out, which gave her a narrow window to neutralize the threats around the landing zone before the aircraft arrived. Overwatch, be advised we're coming in fast and low to minimize exposure time. Can you provide fire support to suppress enemy positions during our approach? The pilot question put everything in perspective. Maya would have to engage multiple enemy fighters with limited ammunition while coordinating with an incoming rescue helicopter. Maya keyed her radio one final time before beginning her assault on the enemy positions. Rescue 27, affirm on fire support. Give me 15 minutes to clear the landing zone, then come straight in. I'll mark my position with infrared strobe. The plan was simple, but extremely dangerous. Maya would have to eliminate or suppress both enemy observation posts with only 13 rounds of pistol ammunition, then maintain control of the landing zone long enough for the helicopter to land and extract her. Against 6 or more enemy fighters with automatic weapons and elevated positions, the odds were heavily against success. Maya began moving toward the eastern observation post, using every available piece of cover to mask her approach. The rocky terrain worked in her favor, providing shadows and concealment that would hide her movement from enemy night vision equipment. But getting close enough for accurate pistol fire meant crossing 200 meters of dangerous ground. The approach took 45 minutes of careful movement, testing each step to avoid loose rocks that might create noise. Maya could hear the enemy fighters talking quietly among themselves, their voices carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. They were discussing search patterns and debating whether the sniper was still in the area. When Maya was within 50 meters of the eastern position, she could see the enemy fighters clearly through gaps in their rock fortification. 3 men with AK-47 rifles, night vision goggles, and radio equipment. One was scanning the approaches to the landing zone, while the other 2 monitored radio frequencies and cleaned their weapons. Maya drew her sidearm and carefully aimed at the fighter who was providing overwatch. The range was at the maximum effective distance for her pistol, but she had trained extensively for precision shooting under stress. Her first shot struck the target's center mass, dropping him silently behind the rocks. The other 2 fighters reacted immediately, grabbing their weapons and trying to locate the source of the gunfire. Maya was already moving to a new position, using the rocks as cover while she lined up her second shot. The enemy fighters were firing wildly in her general direction, their muzzle flashes destroying their night vision and making them easy targets. Maya's second and third shots eliminated the remaining fighters in the eastern position, but the gunfire had alerted the western observation post. She could see fighters there preparing their weapons and calling for reinforcements on their radio. Maya had perhaps 5 minutes before additional enemy forces arrived at the landing zone. Moving toward the western position meant crossing the open landing zone itself, a flat area approximately 100 meters wide with minimal cover. Enemy fighters in the western post would have clear shots at her during the entire crossing, but Maya had no choice if she wanted to clear the area for helicopter operations. Maya began her sprint across the landing zone, zigzagging to present a difficult target for enemy riflemen. Automatic weapons fire erupted from the western position, bullets kicking up dust around her feet as she ran. She dove behind the only available cover, a small depression in the rocky ground that offered minimal protection. Return fire from the enemy position intensified as they realized the sniper was attempting to reach their position. Maya could hear bullets ricocheting off rocks around her hiding place, the enemy fighters coordinating their fire to keep her pinned down. In the distance, she could hear vehicles approaching, reinforcements responding to the radio calls for help. Maya checked her ammunition, 8 rounds remaining. 2 enemy fighters in the western position, unknown number of reinforcements approaching, and a rescue helicopter still 10 minutes out. The situation was rapidly becoming untenable, but surrender wasn't an option for a Navy SEAL. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly echoed across the mountains, growing louder as the rescue aircraft approached the landing zone. Maya could see the enemy fighters in the western position preparing their RPG launcher, aiming at the sky where the helicopter would appear. That weapon had to be neutralized before the rescue bird came within range. Maya made her final desperate gambit. Rather than staying hidden and waiting for the perfect shot, she broke cover and charged directly at the western position. The enemy fighters were focused on the approaching helicopter and didn't expect a direct ground assault from the supposedly suppressed sniper. Her first shot took down the fighter with the RPG launcher just as he was preparing to fire at the incoming helicopter. The second fighter swung his rifle toward Maya, but her follow-up shots found their target before he could effectively respond. Both enemy positions were now neutralized, but Maya could hear vehicles very close to the landing zone. The rescue helicopter appeared over the ridge, flying fast and low exactly as the pilot had promised. Maya activated her infrared strobe and waved her arms to indicate her position, watching as the aircraft adjusted course toward the landing zone. Enemy vehicles were now visible on the access road, racing toward the landing site with reinforcements. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, its rotors still spinning as the crew chief gestured frantically for Maya to board. Enemy fighters from the approaching vehicles opened fire on the aircraft, bullets sparking off its armored hull as Maya sprinted across the landing zone. Maya dove through the helicopter's open door just as enemy fire intensified dramatically. The crew chief pulled her inside while the pilot applied power for immediate takeoff. The aircraft lifted off under heavy fire, climbing rapidly to escape the effective range of small arms. As the rescue helicopter banked away from the landing zone, Maya could see dozens of enemy fighters converging on the area where she had been hiding moments before. Their systematic search had finally led them to the correct location, but they were approximately 60 seconds too late. "Welcome aboard, Staff Sergeant," the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise, offering Maya a headset so she could communicate with the flight crew. "Your teammates have been waiting for you at the forward base. They said you put on quite a show back there." Maya keyed the intercom and managed a tired smile despite her exhaustion. "Just doing my job. How are my team members?" "All alive, all going home," the pilot responded from the cockpit. "Your sniper work saved their lives according to their debrief. Command is already talking about recommendations for valor." Maya looked out the helicopter window at the rugged Afghan landscape passing below. Somewhere down there, enemy fighters were probably still searching for the American sniper who had turned their perfect ambush into a devastating defeat. 23 enemy fighters eliminated, 8 American lives saved, and a successful escape from impossible odds. The mission had tested every skill Maya had learned during her years of training, from sniper school precision to survival techniques learned during SEER training. More importantly, it had proven that her place in the Navy SEALs was earned through capability and determination, not politics or social engineering. As the rescue helicopter flew toward friendly territory, Maya finally allowed herself to relax for the first time in 36 hours. She had faced the ultimate test of a Navy SEAL sniper and emerged victorious. Her teammates were safe, the mission was complete, and she was going home. The helicopter crew chief handed Maya a bottle of water and a combat ration, standard procedure for rescue personnel. But Maya was already thinking ahead to the debrief sessions, the after-action reports, and the lessons learned that would help future SEAL teams facing similar situations. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the helicopter's radio system as they approached the forward operating base. "Overwatch, this is team leader. Outstanding work on mission completion. The whole team is proud to serve with you. Maya keyed her radio one final time during the mission. Team leader, this is Overwatch. Mission accomplished. See you on the ground. The words were simple and professional, but they carried the weight of everything that had happened during those crucial hours in the Afghan mountains. Maya had proven herself in the ultimate test of combat skills, tactical thinking, and personal courage. She was a Navy SEAL sniper, and nothing would ever change that fact.